Hello horror lovers, welcome to the channel. Before the terror begins, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, as it will help me a lot. Also, leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from, I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this because the crisp mountain air filled my lungs as I set out on what should have been a routine hike. The sun had just begun to peek over the snow-capped peaks, casting long shadows across the pristine white landscape. I adjusted my backpack, double-checking that I had all the essentials for a day in the wilderness. "You sure you don't want company, Ben?" my roommate Mike had asked earlier that morning. "These mountains can be unpredictable." I had waved off his concern with a confident smile. "Nah, I'll be fine. Just need some alone time to clear my head. I'll be back before dark." Now, as I took my first steps into the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have taken Mike up on his offer. The trees loomed overhead, their branches heavy with snow, creating a canopy that seemed to swallow the early morning light. I pressed on, my boots crunching through the fresh powder. The familiar exertion of the climb warmed my body, but a chill lingered in my core. Something felt off about this hike, but I couldn't put my finger on it. An hour into my trek, I noticed an eerie silence had fallen over the snow-covered forest. The usual chittering of squirrels and birdsong was conspicuously absent. I paused, my breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. "Hello?" I called out, more to break the silence than anything else. My voice sounded muffled, as if the very air was absorbing the sound. No echo, no response. Just an oppressive quiet that seemed to press in from all sides. A sense of unease crept over me as I continued up the trail. The silence was unnatural, almost predatory in its intensity. I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking behind the stark white trunks of the aspens. My heart skipped a beat when I stumbled upon a set of mysterious footprints in the pristine snow. They appeared suddenly, as if their owner had materialized out of thin air. The tracks were unlike any I had seen before, too large for a human, yet not quite matching any animal I knew. "What the hell?" I muttered, crouching down to examine them more closely. The impressions were deep, suggesting whatever made them was heavy. But there was something else, something that made my skin crawl. The edges of each print seemed to shimmer slightly, as if they weren't quite solid. I stood up, my eyes following the trail of footprints. They led further up the mountain, veering off the main path into a dense thicket of pines. Every instinct told me to turn back, to forget I ever saw them. But curiosity, that dangerous human trait, propelled me forward. As I followed the tracks, confusion and fear gripped me. The footprints wound through the trees in an erratic pattern, sometimes doubling back on themselves or taking impossible leaps across small ravines. And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they ended. I blinked hard, sure I must be missing something. But no, the tracks simply stopped in the middle of a small clearing. There were no trees nearby to climb, no rocks to jump to, just an unbroken expanse of snow stretching out in all directions. "This isn't possible," I said aloud, my voice shaky. "People don't just vanish into thin air." As if in response to my words, a gust of wind whipped through the clearing, carrying with it a sound that might have been a whisper or a distant cry. I spun around, searching for the source, but I was alone. Or was I? The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as an overwhelming feeling of being watched washed over me. My eyes darted from tree to tree, searching for any sign of movement, any hint of what might be out there. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Show yourself." Only silence answered me, but the feeling of unseen eyes boring into me intensified. I took a step back, then another, my heart pounding in my chest. Every shadow seemed to move, every rustle of branches a potential threat. I knew I should leave, retrace my steps and get back to the safety of the main trail, but something held me in place, a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. What had happened here? Where did those tracks lead? And most importantly, what had made them? As I stood there, paralyzed by indecision, the temperature seemed to drop even further. My breath came out in rapid, visible puffs, and a numbness began to creep into my fingers and toes despite my warm gear. "Okay, Ben," I said to myself, trying to inject some courage into my voice. "Time to go. Whatever this is, it's not your problem." I turned to leave, but as I did, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Just at the edge of the clearing, where the trees were thickest, I could have sworn I saw a pale, elongated hand reach out from behind a trunk. That was all it took. Panic surged through me and I bolted. I ran back the way I had come, no longer caring about stealth or caution. Branches whipped at my face, and I stumbled more than once on hidden roots, but I didn't slow down. It wasn't until I burst out onto the main trail, gasping for air, that I realized the true horror of my situation. In my blind panic, I had veered off course. The path before me was unfamiliar, and when I turned to look behind me, I saw only an unbroken expanse of wilderness. I was lost, and the sun was already beginning its descent towards the horizon. As the shadows lengthened around me, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I had encountered in that clearing wasn't content to let me go so easily. The adventure that had begun as a simple day hike had turned into something far more sinister, and deep down I knew this was only the beginning. Against my better judgment, I found myself following the enigmatic footprints deeper into the wilderness. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to turn back, to find the main trail and get off this godforsaken mountain. But something stronger, a primal curiosity mixed with an inexplicable pull, drove me forward. "This is insane," I muttered to myself, carefully placing my feet in the massive, shimmering prints. What am I even doing? The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees growing denser and more twisted with each step. Shadows danced at the corners of my vision, always disappearing when I tried to focus on them. The silence that had unnerved me earlier was now punctuated by soft whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Each step I took felt heavier than the last, as if the forest itself was trying to hold me back. My boots, which had easily crunched through the snow before, now sank deep with every footfall. It was like walking through molasses. "Come on," I grunted, pulling my foot free with a sucking sound. What is this? A bone-chilling wind whipped around me, carrying whispers that seemed just out of earshot. I strained to make out the words, but they remained frustratingly unclear. It was maddening, like trying to recall a half-forgotten dream. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and afraid in the vast whiteness. "Is someone there?" The wind died down abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. Then, so faint I almost missed it, came a reply. "Ben." I whirled around, heart pounding. "Who's there? How do you know my name?" No answer came. I stood still, barely breathing, listening for any sound. But there was nothing except the soft creak of snow-laden branches. "Get it together, Ben," I told myself sternly. "You're imagining things. There's no one out here." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Something was out here with me, something that knew who I was. The realization sent a fresh wave of fear through me, but it also strengthened my resolve. I had to know what was going on. I pressed on, following the tracks as they wound through the trees. The forest grew darker, the canopy overhead so thick that little sunlight penetrated. It should have been early afternoon, but it looked more like twilight. My breath caught in my throat as I spotted a shadowy figure darting between the trees ahead. It was tall, impossibly tall, and moved with an unnatural fluidity. "Hey!" I shouted, breaking into a run. "Wait!" The figure paused for a split second, turning slightly towards me. In that brief moment, I caught a glimpse of a face that was both familiar and alien. It looked almost human, but elongated and pale, with eyes that seemed to glow with an inner light. Then it was gone, melting into the shadows between one blink and the next. I stumbled to a halt, gasping for breath. What the hell was that? I wheezed, bent over with my hands on my knees. As I straightened up, panic set in as I realized I'd lost sight of my own tracks, leaving me disoriented and alone. I spun in a slow circle, trying to get my bearings, but everything looked the same. an endless expanse of white broken only by the dark trunks of trees. "Okay, don't panic," I said aloud, trying to calm myself. "You can figure this out. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west, so if I can just see where it is." But when I looked up, searching for any glimpse of the sun through the canopy, my blood ran cold. The sky, what little I could see of it, was wrong. Instead of blue, it was a deep, swirling purple, shot through with veins of silver. "That's not possible," I whispered, staring in disbelief. A twig snapped behind me, and I spun around, heart in my throat. There, at the edge of a small clearing, stood the figure I'd been chasing. Up close, it was even more terrifying and mesmerizing. Its body seemed to shift and flow, never quite settling into a solid form. "What are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The being tilted its head, regarding me with those glowing eyes. When it spoke, its voice was like the wind through dead leaves. "We are the forgotten," it said. "The lost. The taken." "Taken?" I repeated, a chill running down my spine. "Taken by what?" The creature's form rippled, and for a moment I thought I saw the faces of other people within its shifting mass. Men, women, children, all with expressions of terror frozen on their features. "By the mountain," it replied, "by the hunger that never ends." Before I could ask what it meant, the ground beneath my feet began to tremble. The being's eyes widened, and it started to back away. "It comes," it hissed. "Run, Ben. Run, or join us in the dark." With that, it dissolved into mist, leaving me alone as the shaking intensified. Cracks began to appear in the snow around me, spreading rapidly. I turned to flee, but there was nowhere to go. In every direction, the forest was collapsing, trees toppling and snow giving way to reveal yawning chasms beneath. As the ground opened up beneath me, I had one last terrifying thought. This was what had happened to all those other people. This was how they were taken. Then I was falling, plunging into icy darkness, the world I knew vanishing above me. The adventure that had started with mysterious footprints had led me into a nightmare beyond imagination, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that my ordeal was only beginning. The ground beneath my feet suddenly gave way, plunging me into icy darkness. One moment I was standing in the snow-covered forest, and the next, I was falling through a void so black it seemed to swallow all light and hope. "No!" I screamed, my voice swallowed by the rushing air. My arms flailed uselessly, trying to grab onto something, anything, but finding only emptiness. Just as I thought the fall would never end, terror consumed me as I felt cold, invisible hands grabbing at my limbs, pulling me deeper. They were everywhere, tugging at my clothes, wrapping around my wrists and ankles, brushing against my face with fingers that felt like icicles. "Let go of me!" I yelled, thrashing against the unseen forces. But my struggles only seemed to encourage them. The grip tightened, and I felt myself being pulled in multiple directions at once. A voice, or perhaps many voices layered together, whispered in my ear. "Welcome, traveler. We've been waiting for you." The word sent chills down my spine. "Who are you? What do you want?" Instead of answering, the voices began to chant in a language I didn't understand. The sound reverberated through my body, making my teeth chatter and my vision blur. I struggled against the unseen force, my lungs burning as I fought to break through the surface of... What? There was no water, no tangible substance around me, yet I felt as if I were drowning. "Please," I gasped. "I can't breathe." The chanting grew louder, and the cold hands pulled harder. I felt my consciousness starting to slip away, darkness creeping in at the edges of my vision. Just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, the world around me shifted and blurred, reality seeming to bend and warp. Colors I had no names for swirled past me, and impossible geometries flickered in and out of existence. "What's happening to me?" I croaked, my voice sounding distorted and far away. Suddenly, everything stopped. The falling sensation ceased. The hands released me, and the chanting faded away. For a moment, I floated in absolute nothingness, not even sure if I still had a body. Then, with a rush of sensation that nearly overwhelmed me, I found myself lying on a cold, hard surface. I gasped, sucking in air that tasted stale and metallic. Slowly, I opened my eyes. My mind reeled as I found myself in a vast, otherworldly cavern, surrounded by ethereal blue light. The ceiling arched impossibly high overhead, disappearing into shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. The walls glittered with strange crystals that pulsed with an inner light, casting ever-changing patterns across the rocky floor. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing strangely in the cavernous space. "Is anyone there?" As if in response, a soft glow appeared a few yards away. It coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape, translucent and shimmering. "You shouldn't be here," the figure said, its voice a mixture of concern and curiosity. "How did you find this place?" I struggled to my feet, wincing at the aches in my body. I don't know. I was hiking, and then there were these footprints, and the glowing being moved closer, and I instinctively took a step back. "Ah," it said, a note of understanding in its ethereal voice. "You were called." "Called? By who? What is this place?" The being's form rippled, almost like a sigh. "This is the Undercave, the realm beneath the mountain. As for who called you, that's a complicated question." I looked around, taking in the alien beauty and unsettling strangeness of my surroundings. Are you dead?" A sound like tinkling crystal filled the air. Laughter, I realized. "Not dead, not alive. We simply are, as you will be, in time." Fear gripped me anew. "What do you mean? I don't want to stay here." "Few do at first," the being said gently. "But the mountain has chosen you, as it chose all of us. There's no going back now." I shook my head vehemently. "No, you're wrong. There has to be a way out. I have a life, people who are waiting for me." The glowing figure drifted closer, and I felt a wave of sympathy emanate from it. "I understand your fear, truly. I felt the same when I first arrived, but fighting it will only make the transition harder." "Transition?" I repeated, my voice rising in panic. "I'm not transitioning to anything. I'm getting out of here." I turned and ran, not knowing where I was going, but desperate to find an exit. The cavern seemed to stretch endlessly, the blue light making it impossible to judge distances accurately. Behind me, I heard the being call out, "Be careful! The Undercave doesn't take kindly to those who resist." As if to prove its point, the ground beneath my feet began to shift and ripple. Stalagmites erupted from the floor, forcing me to dodge and weave. The air grew thick and heavy, making each breath a struggle. I pushed on, driven by a primal need to escape. But with each step, the cavern seemed to change and rearrange itself. Passages that looked promising would suddenly end in solid walls. Bridges of stone would crumble as soon as I set foot on them. After what felt like hours of frantic searching, I collapsed to my knees, exhausted and disoriented. The glowing being reappeared, hovering nearby. "Are you ready to listen now?" it asked, not unkindly. I looked up, tears of frustration and fear in my eyes. "I just want to go home." The being's light dimmed slightly, as if in sadness. "I know, but for now this is your home. Come, let me show you around. There's much you need to learn if you're to survive here." As I reluctantly got to my feet, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a journey that would change me in ways I couldn't even imagine. The world I knew was gone, replaced by this underground realm of mystery and danger. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, a part of me had been waiting for this all along. Disbelief gripped me as I took in the impossible underground world stretching out before me. The glowing being, which had introduced itself as Lux, floated beside me as we stood on a high ledge overlooking a vast subterranean landscape. This can't be real, I muttered, rubbing my eyes as if that would somehow change what I was seeing. Lux's light pulsed gently. It's very real, Ben. This is the true heart of the mountain, hidden from the world above. Below us, I saw sprawling caverns connected by bridges of crystalline stone. Rivers of luminescent liquid flowed through the chambers, casting an ever-changing array of colors on the walls. In the distance, massive structures that seemed to be part natural formation and part constructed edifice loomed in the dim light. How is this possible? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How can all of this exist without anyone knowing? Lux drifted closer. The mountain protects its secrets well. It calls to those it chooses like you, but keeps itself hidden from the rest of the world. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed the cavern walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural life. They expanded and contracted slowly, like the breathing of some colossal beast. Are the walls alive? I asked, unable to keep the tremor from my voice. Lux's form shimmered, an approximation of a nod. In a way, the entire undercave is a living entity, constantly shifting and changing. It responds to the emotions and needs of those who dwell within it. As if to demonstrate, a section of the wall nearby suddenly sprouted a cluster of glowing crystals, their light warm and inviting. That's incredible, I admitted, momentarily forgetting my fear in the face of such wonder. Lux began to lead me down a winding path that descended into the heart of the cavern. As we walked, I caught glimpses of translucent figures flitting through the shadows. My heart raced each time I spotted one, a mixture of fear and fascination coursing through me. Who are they? I asked Lux, pointing at a group of spectral forms gathered around a pool of shimmering liquid. They are like me, Lux explained, souls who were called by the mountain and chose to stay. Some have been here for centuries, others for mere decades. I swallowed hard. And they can't leave? Ever? Lux's light dimmed slightly. It's complicated. The mountain's call is strong, and few ever truly wish to leave once they've accepted their place here. But there are always exceptions. As we continued our journey, a haunting melody echoed through the cavern, filling me with an inexplicable sense of longing. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, weaving through the air like a living thing. What's that music? I asked, finding myself swaying slightly to the ethereal tune. It's the song of the Undercave, Lux replied. It's said to be the voice of the mountain itself, expressing its moods and desires. Listen closely, and you might begin to understand its language. I closed my eyes, letting the melody wash over me. For a moment I felt as if I could almost grasp some deeper meaning in the notes, but it slipped away as quickly as it had come. When I opened my eyes again, I gasped. We had entered a vast chamber filled with what looked like floating islands, each one supporting its own miniature ecosystem. Waterfalls of light cascaded between the islands, and strange bioluminescent creatures flitted through the air. Welcome to the Hanging Gardens, Lux announced. This is where many of the newer arrivals choose to make their homes. As we moved through the chamber, I noticed more of the spectral inhabitants. Some regarded me with curiosity while others seemed to shrink away. Why are some of them afraid of me? I asked Lux. You're still solid, Lux explained, still tied to the world above. It makes some of the long-term residents uncomfortable. They've forgotten what it's like to have physical form. Fear and fascination warred within me as I realized I was face to face with the lost souls of the mountain. Each spectral figure I saw had once been a person like me, with a life and loved ones above ground. What had led them to stay here? Would I face the same choice? Lux, I said, my voice tight with emotion. I need you to be honest with me. Am I dead? The glowing being paused, turning to face me fully. Its light pulsed in a way that felt sympathetic. No, Ben. You're not dead. But you're not entirely alive either. At least not in the way you understand it. You're in a state of transition. Transition to what? I demanded, fear creeping back into my voice. Lux's form rippled, That depends on you. The Undercave offers many paths. Some choose to become one with the mountain, fading into pure energy. Others maintain their individuality, becoming like me. And there are those who find a way to return to the surface, forever changed by their time here. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything I'd seen and heard. The enormity of my situation was starting to sink in, and with it came a determination I hadn't felt before. I want to go back, I said firmly. I have a life up there, people who will be looking for me. There has to be a way. Lux's light flickered, and I sensed a mixture of admiration and concern. The path back is not an easy one, Ben. It will test you in ways you can't imagine. Are you sure that's what you want? I looked around at the breathtaking beauty and otherworldly wonder of the Undercave. For a moment I felt the pull of this place, the temptation to let go of my old life and embrace this new existence. But then I thought of my family, my friends, the life I'd built. I'm sure, I said, my resolve strengthening. Whatever it takes, I'm going to find my way home. Lux's form brightened. Very well. Then let your journey truly begin. But remember, Ben, the Undercave changes all who enter it. When you do find your way back, you may not be the same person who fell. As we continued our exploration, those words echoed in my mind. I was determined to return to my life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my time in this underground realm would alter me in ways I couldn't yet fathom. The adventure that had begun with a simple hike had become a quest for survival, identity, and the very nature of existence itself. As Lux and I ventured deeper into the heart of the Undercave, the otherworldly beauty of our surroundings began to take on a more sinister edge. The pulsing walls seemed to close in, and the ethereal music that had once sounded so alluring now carried undertones of menace. Lux, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. You mentioned that the path back wouldn't be easy. What exactly did you mean by that? The glowing being's light dimmed slightly. The Undercave doesn't release its chosen easily, Ben. To prove your worthiness to return, you must face the trials of the Undercave. A chill ran down my spine. Trials? What kind of trials? Before Lux could answer, the ground beneath our feet began to shake. Cracks appeared in the crystalline floor, spreading rapidly. It begins, Lux said, its voice tinged with both excitement and concern. Remember, Ben, the Undercave responds to your thoughts and emotions. Stay focused and trust your instincts. With a thunderous crack, the floor gave way beneath me. I plummeted into darkness. Lux's fading light, the last thing I saw before the void swallowed me whole. I landed hard on a cold, damp surface. Groaning, I pushed myself to my feet, squinting into the gloom. I was in a narrow tunnel, its walls slick with some kind of phosphorescent moss that provided just enough light to see. Lux? I called out, my voice echoing ominously. Are you there? No answer came. I was alone. Taking a deep breath, I started down the tunnel. The air grew thicker as I walked, and I could hear strange, skittering noises in the darkness beyond the reach of the glowing moss. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern. In the center stood an impossibly tall tower, made of what looked like polished obsidian. At its base was a single door. As I approached, words appeared on the door's surface, glowing with an inner fire. To ascend, you must descend. Face your deepest fears or remain forever in the dark. My heart pounded as I reached for the handle. As soon as my fingers touched the cool metal, the world around me dissolved. I found myself back in my childhood home, but everything was wrong. The walls were twisted and warped, and shadows danced in the corners of my vision. Ben? A familiar voice called out. Is that you, sweetie? My breath caught in my throat. Mom? She appeared at the end of the hallway, but her face was blurred and indistinct. Why did you leave us, Ben? Why did you forget about us? Guilt and confusion washed over me. I wouldn't. More figures appeared. My father, my sister, friends I hadn't spoken to in years. All of them with accusing, featureless faces. You abandoned us, they chanted in unison. You chose the mountain over us. I backed away, shaking my head. No, that's not true. I'm trying to get back to you. The figures advanced, their forms twisting and melting together into a nightmarish mass. Then why are you still here? Why haven't you tried harder? Tears streamed down my face as I fought against the rising tide of guilt and self-doubt. Then, Lux's words came back to me. The Undercave responds to your thoughts and emotions. I closed my eyes, concentrating on the love I felt for my family and friends, on my determination to return to them. I haven't forgotten you, I said firmly. I haven't abandoned you. You're the reason I'm fighting to get back. And I won't stop until I find a way. The chanting stopped. When I opened my eyes, the twisted version of my home was gone. I was back in the cavern, standing before the obsidian tower. The door swung open with a soft click. Inside, a spiral staircase stretched upwards into darkness. Taking a deep breath, I began to climb. Each step brought new challenges. I faced illusions of my greatest failures, confronted paths not taken, and grappled with the darkest parts of myself. But with each trial, I grew stronger, more certain of who I was and what I wanted. Finally exhausted and emotionally drained, I reached the top of the tower. There, I found a simple mirror standing alone in an empty room. As I approached, my reflection began to change. I saw myself as I could be. Stronger, wiser, more confident. But I also saw the cost of that transformation etched in my eyes. A haunted look, the weight of the Undercave's mysteries. A voice, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere, spoke. This is what the Undercave offers. Power, knowledge, transformation. Is this truly not what you seek? I stared at my altered reflection, feeling the pull of that potential. For a moment, I wavered. Then I thought of the people waiting for me on the surface, of the life I had built. No, I said firmly. I choose to return as I am, with all my flaws and human limitations. I choose the world above. The mirror shattered, and the tower around me began to crumble. As I fell through swirling darkness, I heard the voice one last time. You have chosen. But remember, Ben, the Undercave is always a part of you now. Its call will never truly fade. I jolted awake, gasping for breath. I was back in the chamber where I had first met Lux, the glowing being hovering nearby. You've returned, Lux said, its light pulsing with what seemed like pride. And you've passed the first trial. But remember, this is only the beginning. The path home is still long and fraught with danger. As I struggled to my feet, still reeling from the intensity of my experience, I knew Lux was right. I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life. But the Undercave wasn't done with me yet. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was determined to face them, carrying with me the lessons and the power I had found within myself. The journey back to the surface, and to myself, had only just begun. As I stood on shaky legs, still reeling from the intensity of the first trial, Lux's ethereal form pulsed with a gentle light. The cavern around us seemed to breathe, its walls expanding and contracting in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. You've done well, Ben, Lux said, its voice a mixture of pride and caution. But the Undercave has only begun to test you. I wiped the sweat from my brow, my mind still reeling from the visions I'd experienced. What's next? More nightmarish illusions? Lux's form shimmered, an approximation of a headshake. The trials are never the same twice. The Undercave adapts, probing for your weaknesses, challenging your resolve in new ways. As if on cue, the ground beneath our feet began to tremble. Cracks appeared in the crystalline floor, spreading like a web. Lux, what's happening? I asked, struggling to maintain my balance. The glowing being's light flickered anxiously. The Undercave is shifting. Prepare yourself, Ben. The second trial begins now. Before I could respond, the floor gave way entirely. I plummeted through darkness, Lux's fading light the last thing I saw before the void swallowed me whole. I landed hard on a surface that felt unnervingly familiar. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I gasped. I was in my old high school gymnasium, but everything was wrong. The walls were covered in a pulsing organic material that looked disturbingly like flesh. The basketball hoops were twisted into grotesque shapes, their nets writhing like tentacles. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing unnaturally in the warped space. "Is anyone there?" A figure stepped out of the shadows at the far end of the gym. My heart nearly stopped as I recognized her. Sarah? Sarah, my high school girlfriend, stood before me. She looked exactly as she had on the day we broke up, right down to the tears in her eyes. But there was something off about her gaze, a vacancy that sent chills down my spine. "Why did you leave me, Ben?" she asked, her voice distorted and echoing. "Why wasn't I enough for you?" I took a step back, my mind reeling. "This isn't real. You're not really Sarah." Her form flickered, briefly revealing a mass of writhing shadows before settling back into Sarah's appearance. "Aren't I? Or am I the part of your past you've tried so hard to forget?" More figures emerged from the shadows, friends I'd lost touch with, teachers who'd been disappointed in me, faces from my past that I'd tried to leave behind. "You can't escape us, Ben," they chanted in unison, their voices blending into an otherworldly chorus. "We are your regrets, your mistakes, your abandoned potential." I closed my eyes, trying to center myself. "This is just another trial," I muttered. "The Undercave is testing me again." When I opened my eyes, the figures had moved closer, their faces now twisted into exaggerated expressions of accusation and despair. "You left us all behind." Sarah's distorted voice rang out. "You ran away from your past, from the person you could have been. Why do you think you deserve to go back now?" The guilt and regret I'd carried for years threatened to overwhelm me. But then I remembered Lux's words. "The Undercave responds to your thoughts and emotions." Taking a deep breath, I faced the crowd of specters from my past. Yes, I've made mistakes. I've hurt people and I've left things unresolved. But that doesn't mean I don't deserve a second chance. The figures wavered, their forms becoming less solid. I continued, my voice growing stronger. "My past is a part of me, but it doesn't define me. I can acknowledge my regrets without being consumed by them." As I spoke, I felt a warmth spreading through my chest. The twisted gymnasium began to fade, replaced by a swirling mist. "I'm sorry for the pain I've caused," I said, addressing each figure in turn. "But I'm not running away anymore. I'm facing my past so I can move forward." With a final unearthly wail, the specters dissolved into mist. The gymnasium melted away, revealing a new chamber of the Undercave. This one was filled with softly glowing crystals that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. Lux appeared beside me, its light warm and comforting. "You've faced the echoes of your past, Ben. You've shown wisdom and growth." I nodded, feeling both drained and somehow lighter. "I think I understand now. These trials aren't just about proving my worth to return. They're about confronting the parts of myself I've tried to ignore." "Precisely," Lux confirmed. "The path home isn't just a physical journey. It's a journey of self-discovery and acceptance." As we moved deeper into the crystal chamber, I noticed something strange. Reflected in each crystal facet was a different moment from my life. Some joyful, some painful, all integral parts of who I was. "The Undercave is showing you the tapestry of your existence," Lux explained. "Every experience, every choice, every relationship has shaped you." I reached out, touching one of the crystals. It pulsed with warmth, and I was flooded with the memory it contained. My first day of college, full of excitement and trepidation. "I've been so focused on getting back," I mused, "that I haven't really thought about who I'll be when I return." Lux's light flickered thoughtfully. "That is the true challenge, Ben. The Undercave changes all who enter it. When you do find your way back, how will you integrate what you've learned here with the life you left behind? As we continued through the chamber, each crystal offering glimpses of my past and potential futures, I realized that the journey home was far more complex than I'd initially thought. It wasn't just about physical escape, but about reconciling the person I had been with the person I was becoming. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with challenges I couldn't yet imagine. But as I moved forward, guided by Lux's ethereal light and the newfound understanding of myself, I felt a growing sense of purpose and determination. Whatever the Undercave had in store for me next, I would face it with open eyes and an open heart, ready to confront the depths of my own soul in my quest to return home. As Lux and I ventured deeper into the ever-shifting realm of the Undercave, the crystalline chamber gradually gave way to a vast open space. The ceiling arched impossibly high above us, disappearing into swirling mists that glowed with an otherworldly light. "Where are we now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Lux's form pulsed gently. "We've reached the Nexus, Ben. It's a place of convergence, where the paths of all who enter the Undercave intersect." As my eyes adjusted to the strange, shifting light, I saw that we stood at the center of an enormous circular platform. Radiating outward from where we stood were countless paths, each one unique in appearance and feeling. "What are all these paths?" I asked, turning slowly to take in the dizzying array of options. "Each represents a different fate," Lux explained, "a different potential future, or past, or present. The Nexus is where choices are made, destinies are altered, and the very fabric of reality can be reshaped." As I peered down one of the paths, I caught glimpses of a life that could have been mine. A successful career I'd once dreamed of, a family I'd imagined. It was tempting, achingly so, to step onto that path and embrace that reality. "Be careful, Ben," Lux warned, sensing my thoughts. "The paths of the Nexus are seductive, but not all lead to where you truly wish to go." I pulled my gaze away, shaking my head to clear it. How do I know which path to choose? Before Lux could answer, a familiar voice echoed through the Nexus. "Ben? Is that really you?" I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. There, standing at the entrance to one of the paths, was my sister, Emily. "Emily?" I gasped, taking a step towards her. "How are you here?" She looked exactly as I remembered her, but there was something off about her eyes. They seemed to shimmer with an unnatural light. "I've been searching for you," Emily said, her voice filled with relief. "We've all been so worried. Come on, I can take you home." She held out her hand, beckoning me towards her path. Every fiber of my being wanted to run to her to embrace my sister and let her lead me back to the world I knew. But Lux's warning rang in my ears, and I hesitated. "Wait," I said, fighting against the pull of my emotions. "How did you get here, Emily? How did you find me?" Emily's smile faltered for just a moment. "Does it matter? I'm here now. We can go home together." I took a step back, my suspicion growing. It does matter. The real Emily wouldn't be here. She wouldn't know how to find this place. As I spoke, Emily's form began to waver, like a mirage in the desert. Her face contorted with anger, and her voice took on an unearthly quality. "Fool," she hissed, her form dissolving into a swirling mass of shadows. "You would reject the easy path home? Then stay here and rot." The shadow creature lunged at me, but Lux interposed itself between us, its light flaring brilliantly. The shadow recoiled with a shriek, dissolving into mist. "Well done, Ben," Lux said, its light gradually dimming back to its usual glow. "You've passed another test. The Nexus often presents illusions of what we most desire, tempting us away from our true path." I took a shaky breath, my heart still racing. I almost fell for it. "If you hadn't warned me earlier." "You must trust your instincts," Lux advised. "The path home won't be the easiest or most tempting option. It will challenge you, force you to confront difficult truths." As we continued to explore the Nexus, more illusions appeared. I saw versions of myself that had achieved great success, timelines where I'd made different choices. Each was tempting in its own way, offering glimpses of lives that could have been. But with each illusion I faced, I found it easier to see through the deception. I began to recognize the subtle wrongness in their eyes, the too perfect nature of the realities they offered. Finally, we came to a path that was different from the others. While most glowed with inviting light or shimmered with tantalizing visions, this one was shrouded in mist, its destination unclear. "This," Lux said softly, "is your true path home." I peered into the mist, trying to make out what lay beyond. "I can't see where it leads." "That's because the journey home isn't about knowing the destination," Lux explained. "It's about having the courage to take each step into the unknown, trusting in yourself and the growth you've experienced." I stood at the threshold of the misty path, feeling the weight of the choice before me. All around us, the other paths called out with their siren songs of easier lives and realized dreams. "What if I'm not strong enough?" I asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in my heart. "What if I can't find my way back?" Lux's light pulsed warmly. "You are stronger than you know, Ben. You've faced your fears, confronted your past, and resisted the temptations of false futures. The strength to find your way home has been within you all along." Taking a deep breath, I stepped onto the misty path. As I did, I felt a surge of energy course through me, as if the Undercave itself was acknowledging my choice. "Remember," Lux said, its form beginning to fade as I moved deeper into the mist, "the trials you've faced here will stay with you. Let them guide you, but don't let them define you. Your journey is far from over, Ben. But you've taken the most important step, choosing to face the unknown with courage and self-awareness." As Lux's voice faded away, I found myself alone on the path, surrounded by swirling mist. The way ahead was uncertain, full of challenges I couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time since I'd fallen into the Undercave, I felt a sense of true purpose and direction. Whatever lay ahead, I was ready to face it. The journey home, to my family, to my world, and to myself, had truly begun. The mist swirled around me as I made my way along the path, each step feeling both uncertain and strangely familiar. The Undercave's ethereal glow had faded, replaced by an ever-shifting landscape that seemed to flicker between past, present, and possible futures. As I walked, voices echoed around me, snippets of conversations from my life. Some I remembered, others I'd forgotten, and some that hadn't happened yet. "Ben, honey, don't forget your lunch." My mother's voice from a childhood memory. "I'm sorry, but we're going to have to let you go." A future I'd always feared. "Will you marry me?" My own voice, in a life I hadn't lived. I pressed on, trying to focus on the path ahead, but the voices grew louder, more insistent. Suddenly, the mist parted, and I found myself in a familiar place, my childhood bedroom. But like everything in the Undercave, it was slightly off. The walls seemed to breathe, and the shadows in the corners moved with a life of their own. A figure sat on the bed, me at about 10 years old. The young Ben looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. "Are you... me?" young Ben asked, his voice trembling slightly. I nodded, approaching slowly. "I am. I'm you from the future." Young Ben's eyes lit up. "Really? Do we become an astronaut like we always wanted?" The innocent question hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd forgotten that childhood dream, abandoned it somewhere along the way for more practical pursuits. "Not exactly," I said, sitting down next to my younger self. "But we've had adventures we never could have imagined." Young Ben's face fell slightly. "Oh, are we happy at least?" The question gave me pause. Was I happy? Before falling into the Undercave, I might have said yes without hesitation. But now, after all I'd experienced and learned about myself, "We're finding our way," I said carefully. "It's not always easy, but we're learning and growing." Young Ben nodded solemnly, seeming to understand more than a child his age should. Is that why you're here? To learn and grow? I think so, I replied. I'm trying to find my way home. Home? Young Ben's brow furrowed. But aren't you already home? Before I could answer, the room began to shift and warp. The walls melted away, and we found ourselves in a vast open space. Stars twinkled overhead, but they were unlike any constellation I'd ever seen. The ground beneath our feet was transparent, showing swirling galaxies and nebulae. Wow, young Ben breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. Is this where we end up? I shook my head, equally awestruck by the cosmic display. I don't think so. I think the Undercave is showing us possibilities. As we watched, the cosmic scene began to change. Images flashed by, moments from my life, paths not taken, potential futures. I saw myself as a successful businessman, as a struggling artist, as a family man, as a lone adventurer. There are so many different ways our life could go, young Ben said, his voice filled with a wisdom beyond his years. How do we choose? I knelt down beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. I don't think we ever stop choosing, Ben. Every day, every decision, shapes who we become. The cosmic scene faded, replaced by the misty path I'd been following. Young Ben began to fade as well, but before he disappeared entirely, he looked at me with those innocent, questioning eyes. Will you remember me? He asked. Will you remember who we wanted to be? As he vanished, his words echoed in my mind. I realized that in my quest to return home, I'd been so focused on who I was and who I might become that I'd forgotten who I'd been. The dreams, the hopes, the unbound potential of youth. I continued along the path, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The mist seemed less oppressive now, and I could almost make out a destination in the distance. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the mist. Lux's ethereal tones. You're nearing the final trial, Ben. Are you prepared? I took a deep breath, centering myself. I think so. What do I need to do? You must make a choice, Lux replied, its form shimmering into view beside me. The path splits ahead. One way leads back to your old life, exactly as you left it. The other... The other? I prompted when Lux trailed off. The other leads to a new beginning. A life infused with the knowledge and growth you've gained here, but without the comfort of the familiar. You would remember your experiences in the Undercave, but you would be starting fresh in the world above. I felt my heart race at the prospect. How can I possibly choose? Lux's light pulsed gently. That, Ben, is the final trial. To truly know yourself, to understand what you value most, and to have the courage to choose. As we approached the split in the path, I could see two distinct routes stretching out before me. One shimmered with the comforting glow of familiarity, the other crackled with the energy of untapped potential. I stood at the crossroads, the weight of the decision heavy on my shoulders. The voice of my younger self echoed in my mind. Will you remember who we wanted to be? With a deep breath, I made my choice and took a step forward, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The Undercave had changed me, challenged me, forced me to confront aspects of myself I'd long ignored. Now, it was time to take those lessons back to the world above, wherever that path might lead. As I moved forward, the mist began to clear, and I could see a glimmer of sunlight in the distance. The way home, whatever home might now mean, was finally within reach. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the path that crackled with untapped potential. As soon as my foot touched the shimmering surface, the world around me began to shift and warp. The misty corridors of the Undercave melted away, replaced by a dizzying vortex of light and color. Lux's voice echoed around me, growing fainter with each word. Remember, Ben, the journey doesn't end here, it's only beginning. I wanted to respond, to thank Lux for its guidance, but my voice caught in my throat as I was swept up in the vortex. Images flashed before my eyes, Memories of my time in the undercave, faces of those I'd left behind in the world above, glimpses of possible futures. Suddenly, everything went dark. For a moment, panic gripped me. Had I made the wrong choice? But then, I felt something I hadn't experienced in what felt like an eternity. A cool breeze on my face. My eyes fluttered open, squinting against the harsh sunlight. I was lying on my back, the smell of pine needles and damp earth filling my nostrils. Slowly I sat up, taking in my surroundings. I was in a forest clearing, but not the same one where I'd first discovered the mysterious footprints. This place was unfamiliar, yet somehow felt right. "Hello?" I called out, my voice hoarse. "Is anyone there?" No response came, save for the chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves in the wind. I got to my feet, brushing off my clothes. They were the same ones I'd worn when I fell into the undercave, but they looked newer somehow, as if the journey had refreshed them along with me. As I took stock of myself, I realized something was different. My mind felt clearer, sharper. The experiences I'd had in the undercave were still vivid, but they felt integrated into my being in a way I couldn't quite explain. A rustling in the bushes nearby caught my attention. I tensed, half expecting another trial or illusion. Instead, a young woman emerged, looking as surprised to see me as I was to see her. "Oh," she exclaimed, taking a step back. "I didn't expect to find anyone else out here." I raised my hands in a gesture of peace. "It's okay. I'm a bit lost myself. I'm Ben." She relaxed slightly, offering a small smile. "I'm Lily. Are you a hiker? I didn't see any other cars at the trailhead." I hesitated, unsure how to explain my situation. "It's a long story. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure where I am or how I got here." Lily's expression shifted from wariness to concern. "Are you all right? Did you hit your head or something?" No, I'm fine," I assured her. "Just a bit disoriented. Could you tell me where we are exactly?" She gave me an odd look but answered, "We're in Whispering Pine State Park, about 2 hours north of the city." My mind raced. This was hundreds of miles from where I'd started my hike. The undercave had not only transformed me but had deposited me in an entirely new location. I now understood what Lux meant by a new beginning. Lily was still watching me, concern evident in her eyes. "Look, my campsite isn't far from here. Why don't you come back with me? We can get you some water and maybe figure out how to get you back to wherever you came from." I nodded, grateful for her kindness. "Thank you. I'd appreciate that." As we walked, Lily asked me questions about myself. I answered as honestly as I could without mentioning the undercave, realizing as I spoke that my experiences there had given me a new perspective on my life. "So, what brings you out to the wilderness?" I asked, deflecting attention from myself. Lily's face lit up. "I'm a botanist. I'm out here studying a rare species of orchid that only grows in this region. It's fascinating how these delicate flowers can thrive in such harsh conditions." Her enthusiasm reminded me of my younger self's passion for space exploration. I felt a pang of regret for abandoning those dreams, but also a surge of excitement. This new beginning was a chance to rekindle that sense of wonder and curiosity. "That sounds incredible," I said sincerely. "I'd love to hear more about your work." As we reached her campsite, I caught sight of my reflection in a small stream. I looked the same, yet different. My eyes seemed to hold a new depth, reflecting the wisdom gained from my journey. Lily busied herself with preparing some tea over a small camping stove. As she worked, she asked, "So, Ben, what will you do now? Do you need to call someone to pick you up?" I paused, considering my options. The path back to my old life was closed, but the possibilities stretching out before me were endless. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. "Actually," I said, a smile spreading across my face, "I think I might stick around for a while. If you don't mind the company, I'd love to learn more about these orchids you're studying." Lily looked up, surprised but pleased. "Really? Most people's eyes glaze over when I start talking about plant biology." I laughed. feeling lighter than I had in years. Well, I'm not most people, and I have a feeling this is exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. As we sat by the campfire that evening, sharing stories and discussing the wonders of the natural world, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The Undercave had challenged me, changed me, and ultimately led me to this moment, a new beginning, full of potential and wonder. I knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. I had no job, no place to live, and a lot of explaining to do to the people from my old life. But I also had a newfound strength, a clearer sense of purpose, and an openness to the possibilities life had to offer. As I gazed up at the stars, brighter and more numerous than I'd ever seen in the city, I whispered a silent thank you to Lux and the Undercave. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them with courage, wisdom, and a rekindled sense of adventure. The end of one journey had become the beginning of another, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead. The weeks following my emergence from the Undercave passed in a whirlwind of activity and discovery. Lily, intrigued by my sudden appearance and genuine interest in her work, had invited me to assist with her research. I threw myself into the task with enthusiasm, finding a deep satisfaction in the meticulous work of cataloging plant species and analyzing soil samples. One sunny afternoon, as we crouched among a cluster of the rare orchids Lily was studying, she turned to me with a curious expression. "Ben," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "I have to ask. You've been here for almost a month now, helping me with my research. Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful, but don't you have a life to get back to?" I paused, considering how to answer. The truth was, I had made a few discreet calls to let my family know I was safe, but I had been vague about my whereabouts and experiences. How could I explain the Undercave and the profound changes it had wrought in me? The life I had before, I began slowly. It doesn't quite fit anymore. Being here, doing this work with you, it feels right in a way nothing has in a long time. Lily nodded, her eyes understanding. I get that. Nature has a way of putting things into perspective. But surely there are people wondering where you are. What happened to you? I sighed, realizing it was time to face the reality of my situation. You're right. I can't hide out here forever, as tempting as that might be. I need to go back, at least for a little while, to tie up loose ends. The next day I stood at the edge of the campsite, a borrowed backpack slung over my shoulder. Lily watched me with a mixture of concern and something else I couldn't quite identify. "Are you sure you don't want me to drive you to the bus station?" she asked. I shook my head, smiling. "No, I think I need this hike. It'll give me time to think, to prepare for what's coming." Lily stepped forward, surprising me with a quick hug. "Well, don't be a stranger, okay? You've become a pretty good research assistant. I'd hate to lose you entirely." As I made my way through the forest, my mind wandered back to the Undercave. The lessons I'd learned there, the trials I'd faced, they all seemed both distant and immediate. I wondered if Lux was watching me somehow, if the enigmatic being knew how profoundly it had changed my life. The journey back to my old life was surreal. As I walked the familiar streets of my hometown, everything looked the same, and yet I felt like a stranger. My parents' relief at seeing me was palpable, but I could see the questions in their eyes, the worry etched in the new lines on their faces. "Ben, honey," my mother said, her voice trembling slightly. "Where have you been? We've been so worried." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "Mom, Dad, I have a lot to tell you. It's going to sound crazy, but I need you to listen with an open mind." Over the next few hours, I told them a version of my story. I spoke of getting lost in the wilderness, of a journey of self-discovery, of finding a new purpose. I couldn't bring myself to mention the Undercave directly, but I tried to convey the profound impact of my experiences. My father leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "So what does this mean, son? Are you coming home?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken expectations and hopes. I looked around the living room at the familiar photos and knickknacks that had once defined my world. I felt a surge of love for my parents, for the life they had given me, but also a certainty that I couldn't simply slip back into my old routines. "I love you both," I said carefully, "and I'm so grateful for everything you've done for me. But I've found something, a purpose, a calling. I can't just abandon that." My mother's eyes filled with tears, but there was a glimmer of understanding there too. "You've changed, Ben. I can see it in your eyes. You seem more sure of yourself." I nodded, relieved that she could see the positive changes in me. "I am, Mom. For the first time in a long time, I know what I want to do with my life." Over the next few days, I tied up loose ends. I resigned from my old job, explaining to my bewildered boss that I was pursuing a new career in environmental research. I sorted through my belongings, donating most of them, and packing only what I truly needed. As I prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside. "Ben, I won't pretend to understand everything you've been through, but I want you to know your mother and I are proud of you. Whatever this new path is, we support you." His words meant more to me than he could know. As I hugged my parents goodbye, I felt a sense of closure. The Undercave had shown me the importance of facing my past, and now I had done so. I was free to move forward. The bus ride back to Whispering Pines was filled with anticipation. As the familiar landscape came into view, I felt a sense of homecoming that I hadn't experienced in my parents' house. Lily was waiting at the trailhead, her face breaking into a wide smile as I approached. "Welcome back, research assistant," she said teasingly. "Ready to get back to work?" I grinned, feeling the excitement of new possibilities bubbling up inside me. "Absolutely. But first, I have an idea I want to run by you. How would you feel about expanding your research? I've been thinking about the interconnectedness of ecosystems, and I have some theories." As we walked back to the campsite, deep in discussion about potential research projects, I felt a profound sense of rightness. The Undercave had led me here, to this moment, this path. It wasn't just about studying plants or being in nature. It was about rediscovering my passion for exploration, for understanding the world around me. That night, as I lay in my tent listening to the sounds of the forest, I whispered a quiet thanks to Lux and the Undercave. The journey had been difficult, often terrifying, but it had led me to exactly where I needed to be. The future stretched out before me, full of unknowns and possibilities. But this time I was ready to face it with open eyes and an open heart, eager to see where this new path would lead. 6 months had passed since I'd returned to Whispering Pines, and life had fallen into a new rhythm. Lily and I had expanded our research, securing a small grant to study the interconnected ecosystems of the park. Our days were filled with fieldwork, data analysis, and long discussions about the intricate web of life we were uncovering. One crisp autumn morning, as we were setting up our equipment near a bubbling stream, Lily turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Ben," she said, adjusting her backpack, "sometimes I still can't believe how much our work has grown. And it all started because you literally wandered out of the woods that day." I chuckled, but felt a familiar twinge in my chest at the memory of the Undercave. Life has a funny way of leading us where we need to go, doesn't it? Lily nodded, then hesitated. "Ben, can I ask you something? You've never really explained what happened to you before we met. I mean, I know you said you got lost, but there's more to it, isn't there?" I paused, considering how to respond. I'd grown close to Lily over the past months, and the weight of my secret sometimes felt heavy between us. But how could I explain the Undercave without sounding completely insane? Before I could answer, a strange sound caught our attention. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was a sound I'd hoped never to hear again, the otherworldly music of the Undercave. "Do you hear that?" I asked, my voice tight with sudden anxiety. Lily furrowed her brow. Hear what? I don't hear anything unusual. The music grew louder, and with it came a familiar mist creeping along the forest floor. Panic gripped me as I realized what was happening. Lily, we need to leave. Now. I grabbed her arm, ready to run, but she resisted. Ben, what's going on? You're scaring me. Her eyes were wide with confusion and concern, but it was too late. The mist swirled around us, thickening rapidly. I heard Lily gasp as the world around us began to fade away, replaced by the shimmering, otherworldly landscape of the Undercave. As the transformation completed, I found myself standing in a familiar crystalline chamber, Lily beside me. Her face was a mask of shock and disbelief. Ben, she whispered, her voice trembling, where are we? What just happened? Before I could respond, a familiar ethereal voice filled the air. Welcome back, Ben, and welcome, Lily, to the Undercave. Lux materialized before us, its glowing form pulsing gently. Lily stumbled back, her scientific mind clearly struggling to process what she was seeing. Lux, I said, a mixture of fear and awe in my voice. Why have you brought us here? I thought my journey was over. The being's light flickered, an approximation of a sigh. Your journey is never truly over, Ben. The Undercave has been watching you, and it has determined that there is more for you to learn and to teach. I felt Lily's hand grip my arm tightly. Ben, you know this thing? What's going on? Taking a deep breath, I turned to her. Lily, remember when you asked what really happened to me before we met? This is it. This is the Undercave. It's where I was, where I learned to see the world differently. Lily's eyes darted between me and Lux, her scientific skepticism warring with the undeniable reality before her. But this is impossible. Geologically, physically impossible. Lux's light pulsed with what seemed like amusement. Many things are possible here that defy your surface world's understanding, Lily. The Undercave exists in the spaces between reality, shaped by thought and emotion as much as by physical laws. I watched as Lily's expression shifted from disbelief to wonder. Despite her shock, I could see her keen mind already working to understand this new reality. Why am I here? She asked, her voice steadier now. Why bring me into this? Lux turned its attention to her. You are here because you are important to Ben, and because your work together has caught the attention of the Undercave. The knowledge you seek about the interconnectedness of life? It goes deeper than you could have imagined. As Lux spoke, the chamber around us began to change. The walls became transparent, revealing a vast network of glowing roots and mycelium, pulsing with energy and information. This, Lux explained, is the true web of life. It extends far beyond your surface world, connecting all things in ways your science is only beginning to grasp. Lily's eyes were wide with wonder, her earlier fear forgotten in the face of this incredible revelation. It's beautiful, she breathed, but how is this possible? I placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling a surge of protectiveness. The Undercave has a way of challenging everything you think you know, but it also opens your eyes to incredible possibilities. Lux's form shimmered. You both have been brought here to learn, to see the deeper truths of the world you study. But be warned, the Undercave's lessons are not always easy. Are you prepared for what lies ahead? I looked at Lily, seeing the mixture of fear and excitement in her eyes. I recognized it. It was the same look I'd had when I first embraced the Undercave's challenges. We're ready, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Whatever the Undercave has to teach us, we'll face it together. Lily nodded, squeezing my hand. I have about 1,000,000 questions, but yes, I want to understand. Lux's light brightened. Then let your journey begin anew. Remember, in the Undercave, nothing is quite as it seems. Trust in each other, and in the wisdom you've already gained. As Lux faded away, the chamber around us began to shift and change. I felt Lily's hand tighten in mine as we faced the unknown together. whatever challenges the Undercave had in store for us. I knew that our bond, forged in the world above and now tested in this realm of wonder and mystery, would be our greatest strength. The Undercave had called us both now, intertwining our fates in ways I couldn't yet fathom. As we took our first steps into this new adventure, I felt a mixture of trepidation and exhilaration. The journey that had begun with my solitary fall into the unknown had become something greater, a shared quest for understanding that would change us both forever. As the chamber around us continued to shift, Lily and I found ourselves in a vast underground forest. Bioluminescent fungi cast an ethereal glow over everything, illuminating trees with translucent bark and leaves that seemed to pulse with inner light. "This is incredible," Lily breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "Ben, how did you ever leave this place?" I chuckled softly, remembering my own initial awe. Believe it or not, it wasn't always this beautiful. The Undercave has a way of reflecting your state of mind. As we ventured deeper into the forest, I noticed something strange. The ground beneath our feet seemed to respond to our presence, subtle patterns of light spreading out from each step we took. Lily noticed it too. "Look at this, Ben. It's almost as if the forest floor is communicating." Before I could respond, a familiar voice echoed around us. "Very perceptive, Lily," Lux said, its glowing form materializing beside us. "What you're seeing is the mycelial network in action. In the Undercave, its processes are visible to the naked eye." Lily knelt down, her scientist's curiosity overcoming any lingering fear. "Incredible. We've theorized about the extent of mycelial communication in surface ecosystems, but this is beyond anything we imagined." Lux pulsed with what seemed like approval. "The Undercave has brought you here to deepen your understanding of interconnectedness. But be warned, this lesson may challenge you in unexpected ways." As if on cue, the forest around us began to change. The trees grew larger, their branches intertwining overhead to form a dense canopy. The bioluminescent fungi multiplied, creating intricate patterns that seemed to convey meaning just beyond our comprehension. Suddenly, I felt a strange sensation as if tendrils of energy were reaching out to me. "Lily," I said, my voice tight with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Do you feel that?" She nodded, her eyes wide. It's trying to connect with us somehow." Lux's light flickered. "The forest is inviting you to join its network, to experience true symbiosis. But remember, in the Undercave, such connections can be profound and life-altering. The choice to accept is yours." I looked at Lily, seeing my own uncertainty reflected in her eyes. "What do you think?" I asked. "Should we do this?" Lily took a deep breath, her scientist's curiosity warring with caution. "We came here to learn, didn't we? This could be an opportunity to understand ecosystems in a way no one ever has before." Nodding, I turned back to Lux. "We're ready. What do we need to do?" "Simply open your minds," Lux instructed. "Allow the forest to make the connection." Taking Lily's hand, I closed my eyes and tried to clear my mind. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, I felt it. A rush of sensation unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Images, feelings, and knowledge flooded my consciousness. I saw the intricate web of life from the perspective of the trees, felt the constant flow of nutrients and information through the mycelial network. Centuries of growth, decay, and renewal played out in seconds. I heard Lily gasp beside me, and somehow I could sense her experiences too. We were connected not just to the forest, but to each other, our consciousness intertwined with the vast network of life around us. "Ben," Lily's voice echoed in my mind, filled with awe and a touch of fear. I can't even describe it." "I know," I responded, marveling at our ability to communicate without speaking. "It's overwhelming, but also beautiful." As we acclimated to the connection, I began to understand why Lux had brought us here. The interconnectedness we'd been studying on the surface was just a fraction of the true symbiosis that existed in nature. Every organism, from the tiniest bacterium to the largest tree, played a crucial role in the health and balance of the entire ecosystem. But with this understanding came a profound realization of our own impact on the world. I felt the forest's pain from deforestation, its struggle against pollution, its slow adaptation to climate change. The emotions were so intense, so all-encompassing that I felt myself beginning to lose my sense of self. "Lily," I called out, both mentally and aloud, "I think we need to disconnect. It's too much." I felt her agreement, tinged with reluctance, but as we tried to pull away, we encountered resistance. The forest, it seemed, was reluctant to let us go. "Lux," I called out, panic rising in my chest. "We need help." The glowing being's voice cut through the overwhelming sensations. "Remember who you are. Your individuality is as important as your connection. Find the balance." Focusing on Lux's words, I concentrated on my sense of self, my memories, my identity, my connection to Lily. Gradually, I felt the forest's grip loosen. With a final mental push, we broke free of the symbiotic link. I opened my eyes to find myself back in the luminescent forest, Lily beside me. We were both breathing heavily as if we'd run a marathon. "Are you okay?" I asked, reaching out to steady her. Lily nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of wonder and residual fear. "That was intense. I've never experienced anything like it." Lux reappeared, its light pulsing gently. "You've taken the first step towards a deeper understanding. But remember, true balance lies in maintaining your individual perspective while recognizing your place in the greater web of life." As we sat there, processing what we'd experienced, I realized that our journey in the Undercave was far from over. This lesson in symbiosis had opened our eyes to a level of interconnectedness we'd never imagined. But it had also shown us the dangers of losing ourselves in that connection. "What now?" Lily asked, her voice steady despite the enormity of what we'd just been through. I squeezed her hand, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Now we keep learning. We take what we've experienced here and find a way to apply it to our work on the surface." Lux's light brightened with approval. "Wise words, Ben. Your journey continues, and with it the potential to bridge the gap between the Undercave's wisdom and your world's understanding." As we prepared to face whatever challenge the Undercave had in store for us next, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Despite the dangers and the overwhelming nature of our experiences, we were being given a gift, a chance to see the world in a way few ever would. Whatever came next, I knew that Lily and I would face it together, forever changed by the symbiosis we'd experienced in this luminescent forest. As we left the luminescent forest behind, Lily and I found ourselves in a new area of the Undercave. The air here felt heavier, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Crystalline formations jutted out from the walls, each one reflecting distorted images of the world above. "Ben," Lily whispered, her voice tinged with awe and a hint of fear. "What is this place?" I shook my head, equally mystified. "I'm not sure. I've never seen this part of the Undercave before." As if in response to our confusion, Lux materialized before us, its glow subdued. "Welcome to the Chamber of Echoes. Here, the consequences of actions in the world above reverberate through the Undercave." No sooner had Lux spoken than the crystals around us began to pulse with light. Images flickered across their surfaces, forests being cleared, oceans filled with plastic, animals fleeing from wildfires. Lily gasped, her hand tightening in mine. "It's showing us environmental destruction?" Lux's light pulsed solemnly. "The Undercave is connected to all things. What happens above affects the balance below. This chamber reflects the harm being done to the natural world." As we watched, I felt a growing sense of despair. The sheer scale of the destruction was overwhelming. "How can we possibly make a difference against all of this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, the images in the crystals changed. We saw ourselves, back in Whispering Pines working on our research. The scene expanded, showing our findings being published, influencing policy decisions, inspiring other researchers. Your work has more impact than you realize, Lux explained. The knowledge you gain and share creates ripples of change. Lily stepped closer to one of the crystals, her face illuminated by its glow. But is it enough? There's so much damage being done. As if in response to her question, the chamber began to shift. The ground beneath our feet became transparent, revealing a vast network of roots and mycelium, similar to what we'd seen in the forest. But here, we could see how the network was struggling, parts of it withering and dying. The balance is delicate, Lux said, its voice echoing around us. Every action, no matter how small, can tip the scales. You've been given insight into the true nature of interconnectedness. With that knowledge comes great responsibility. I felt the weight of Lux's words settle on my shoulders. What are we supposed to do? We're just two researchers. How can we possibly address problems of this magnitude? Lux's form shimmered, expanding to surround us. You are more than just researchers. You are bridges between the wisdom of the Undercave and the world above. Your understanding of true symbiosis gives you a unique perspective. As Lux spoke, the crystals began to show new images. We saw ourselves speaking to crowds, leading expeditions, collaborating with other scientists. We saw our ideas spreading, influencing a new generation of environmentalists and researchers. Lily's eyes widened as she watched. Is this our future? A possible future, Lux corrected. The path you take is up to you. But know that the Undercave has chosen you for a reason. Your potential to affect change is great if you choose to embrace it. I turned to Lily, seeing the mix of determination and uncertainty in her eyes that I felt in my own heart. What do you think? Are we ready for this kind of responsibility? Lily was quiet for a moment, her gaze moving from the crystals to the struggling mycelial network beneath our feet. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady and resolved. I don't know if we're ready, but I know we have to try. We can't unsee what we've seen here, Ben. We can't unfeel what we felt in that forest. I nodded, feeling a surge of admiration for her courage. You're right. We have a duty to share what we've learned, to try and make a difference. Lux's light brightened, filling the chamber. Your decision is a weighty one, but it is the right one. Remember, the path ahead will not be easy. You will face skepticism, resistance, and moments of doubt. But you will also have each other, and the wisdom of the Undercave to guide you. As Lux spoke, the chamber began to change once more. The crystals receded into the walls, and a new path appeared before us, leading deeper into the Undercave. This path will take you to your final challenge, Lux explained. It will test not just your understanding, but your resolve to act on what you've learned. I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of anticipation and trepidation. We're ready, I said, surprised by the confidence in my voice. Lily squeezed my hand, her expression mirroring my determination. Together, she added. As we stepped onto the new path, I felt a profound shift within myself. The Ben who had first fallen into the Undercave, lost and unsure, seemed like a distant memory. In his place stood someone new, someone who had seen the true nature of interconnectedness, who understood the weight of responsibility that came with such knowledge. Lily and I walked forward hand in hand, ready to face whatever final challenge the Undercave had in store for us. We knew that when we returned to the world above, nothing would be the same. We had been changed, not just by the wonders we'd seen, but by the responsibility we'd chosen to accept. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential obstacles and difficult choices. But as we ventured deeper into the Undercave, I felt a sense of purpose, stronger than anything I'd ever known. Whatever came next, we would face it together, armed with the wisdom of the Undercave and the determination to make a difference in the world above. As Lily and I followed the new path deeper into the Undercave, The air around us grew thick with anticipation. The walls pulsed with a soft rhythmic light, almost like a heartbeat. After what felt like hours of walking, we emerged into a vast circular chamber unlike anything we'd seen before. The room was divided into 4 quadrants, each depicting a different scene. As we stepped into the center, Lux materialized before us, its light more intense than ever. "Welcome to the Crucible of Choice," Lux announced, its voice echoing through the chamber. "This is where your understanding will be put to the ultimate test." I felt Lily's hand tighten in mine. "What kind of test?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tension I could feel in her grip. Lux's form expanded, encompassing the entire room. "You will be presented with 4 scenarios, each representing a critical environmental challenge. You must choose one to address, knowing that your choice will have far-reaching consequences both in the world above and in the Undercave." As Lux spoke, the 4 quadrants of the room came to life. In the first, we saw a sprawling city choked with smog, its inhabitants struggling to breathe. The second showed a once lush rainforest reduced to charred stumps. The third depicted melting polar ice caps, with displaced wildlife struggling to survive. The fourth revealed a polluted ocean, its waters thick with plastic and dying marine life. "Each of these problems is interconnected," Lux explained. "Solving one may alleviate others, but it may also exacerbate some. You must use the wisdom you've gained to make your choice." I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me. How can we possibly choose? They're all critically important. Lily stepped forward, her eyes moving from one scene to another. "It's like a real-world trolley problem," she murmured. "No matter what we choose, something suffers." Lux pulsed in agreement. "That is the nature of the challenge you face. In the world above, you will often be confronted with difficult choices. This crucible is designed to prepare you for those moments." As we stood there, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the choice before us, I felt a subtle shift in the air. The scenes began to move, showing the cascading effects of each problem. The smog-choked city led to increased respiratory diseases and reduced quality of life. The deforested area caused loss of biodiversity and contributed to climate change. The melting ice caps led to rising sea levels and displaced communities. The polluted ocean resulted in collapsing food chains and widespread ecosystem damage. Lily turned to me, her face etched with concern. "Ben, how can we possibly make this choice? Each problem is devastating in its own way." I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. "We need to think about what we've learned. The interconnectedness of all things, the importance of balance, the ripple effects of our actions." We spent what felt like hours discussing, debating, and analyzing each scenario. We considered the immediate impacts, the long-term consequences, and the potential for cascading effects. Finally, we turned back to Lux. "We've made our decision," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Lux's light dimmed slightly, focusing on us. "And what have you chosen?" Lily spoke up, her voice clear and determined. "We choose to address the deforestation. The forests are critical carbon sinks, home to countless species and vital to the water cycle. By focusing on reforestation and protection of existing forests, we can help mitigate climate change, preserve biodiversity, and indirectly address some of the other issues." I nodded in agreement. The mycelial networks we experienced showed us the true importance of forests. They're not just trees. They're entire ecosystems that support life far beyond their boundaries. As we spoke, the chamber began to change. The quadrant showing the deforested area expanded, filling the entire room. We watched as our chosen solution played out. Replanted forests growing, animals returning, the air clearing. But we also saw the challenges: resistance from logging companies, the slow pace of growth, the ongoing struggle against climate change. Lux's light pulsed, with what felt like approval. "You have chosen wisely, understanding that there is no perfect solution. Your decision shows an appreciation for the complexities of environmental challenges. and the far-reaching impacts of focused action. Suddenly, the room shifted again, and we found ourselves back in the crystalline chamber where our journey had begun. Lux hovered before us, its light soft and comforting. "You have completed your journey in the Undercave," Lux said. "You came seeking knowledge, and you leave with both wisdom and purpose." Lily looked at me, her eyes shining with a mix of emotions. "It feels like we've been here for months, but also like no time has passed at all." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "Lux, what happens now? How do we take what we've learned back to the surface?" Lux's form shimmered. "The knowledge you've gained, the connections you've felt, these will stay with you. Your challenge now is to translate this understanding into action in your world." As Lux spoke, I felt a familiar mist beginning to swirl around us. The Undercave was preparing to return us to the surface. "Remember," Lux's voice echoed as the mist thickened, "you are now bridges between two worlds. Use your knowledge wisely, act with purpose, and never forget the interconnectedness of all things." The mist enveloped us completely, and I felt the now familiar sensation of transition. When it cleared, Lily and I found ourselves back in Whispering Pines, standing by the same stream where our journey had begun. For a moment, we stood in silence, the sounds of the forest around us feeling both familiar and somehow new. "Did that really happen?" Lily whispered, her eyes wide as she looked around. I squeezed her hand, feeling the lingering connection we'd shared in the Undercave. "It did, and now we have work to do." As we gathered our research equipment, our minds still reeling from our experience, I felt a profound sense of purpose. The Undercave had changed us, given us a mission. The path ahead would be challenging, but as I looked at Lily, I knew we were ready to face it together. Our journey in the Undercave was over, but our real work was just beginning. With the wisdom we'd gained and the bond we'd forged, we were prepared to become the bridges Lux had spoken of, connecting the deep understanding of the Undercave with the world that so desperately needed it. As we headed back to our research station, the forest around us seemed to pulse with new life and meaning. Our adventure might have ended, but our mission to protect and nurture the interconnected web of life was just beginning. The months following our return from the Undercave were a whirlwind of activity. Lily and I threw ourselves into our research with renewed vigor, our experiences underground providing us with insights and perspectives that transformed our work. One crisp autumn morning, as we set up our equipment in a secluded part of Whispering Pines, Lily turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Ben," she said, adjusting her tablet, "do you ever wonder if anyone would believe us if we told them about the Undercave?" I chuckled softly, checking the soil moisture sensors. "Honestly, I'm not sure I'd believe it myself if I hadn't lived through it." Lily nodded, her eyes scanning the forest around us. "It's just, sometimes it feels like a dream, but then I'll notice something, the way the sunlight filters through the leaves, or the pattern of lichen on a rock, and it all comes rushing back." "I know what you mean," I replied, standing up and brushing dirt from my knees. "It's like we're seeing the world through new eyes." As we worked, I found myself constantly aware of the complex web of life surrounding us. The mycelial networks we'd experienced in the Undercave had opened my eyes to the intricate connections between every living thing in the forest. Suddenly, Lily gasped, pointing to a nearby tree. "Ben, look!" I followed her gaze and felt my breath catch. A shimmering pattern of light was spreading across the tree's bark, reminiscent of the bioluminescent forest we'd seen underground. "Is that?" Lily whispered, her eyes wide. I approached the tree cautiously, half expecting to hear Lux's ethereal voice, but as I got closer the shimmer faded, leaving only normal bark behind. "It's gone," I said, running my hand over the rough surface. "But we both saw it, right?" Lily nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. It was like the Undercave was reaching out to us just for a moment. The incident shook us both, serving as a vivid reminder of our experiences and the responsibility we'd accepted. Over the next few weeks, we threw ourselves into our work with even greater determination. Our research began to gain attention in academic circles. Our papers on forest ecosystem interconnectivity and the role of mycelial networks in environmental health were generating buzz, and we found ourselves invited to speak at conferences and universities. One evening, as we prepared for a major presentation, Lily paced our small office, nervous energy radiating from her. "What if they don't understand?" she fretted, gesturing at our notes. "What if they think we're crazy?" I stood up from my desk and gently took her hands in mine. "They might not understand everything," I said softly, "but that's okay. Remember what Lux said? We're bridges. Our job is to translate what we learned in the Undercave into terms the surface world can grasp." Lily took a deep breath, visibly calming. "You're right. It's just, sometimes I feel the weight of what we experienced, what we know. It's overwhelming." I nodded, understanding completely. "I feel it too, but that's why we're doing this together." Our presentation was a success, sparking intense discussions and new collaborations. As our work gained traction, we found ourselves increasingly involved in conservation efforts and environmental policy discussions. One day, as we hiked through a part of the forest slated for logging, we encountered a group of protesters. Their leader, a passionate young woman named Maya, approached us. "Dr. Meadows, Dr. Chen," she called out, recognizing us from our recent media appearances. "We're so glad you're here. Can you talk to the logging company? Make them understand what they're destroying?" I exchanged a glance with Lily, seeing my own hesitation reflected in her eyes. We'd been careful not to become too entangled in political issues, focusing instead on education and research. But as I looked around at the ancient trees, I felt a familiar resonance, an echo of the Undercave's wisdom. In my mind's eye, I could see the vast mycelial network beneath our feet, the complex ecosystem that would be devastated by clear-cutting. Lily squeezed my hand, a silent communication passing between us. We both knew what we had to do. "We'll talk to them," I said to Maya, my voice firm with newfound resolve. "But more than that, we want to work with you, to help people understand why this forest is so crucial." Over the next few weeks, we threw ourselves into the conservation effort. We organized educational hikes, showing people the hidden wonders of the forest. We met with logging company executives, using our research to illustrate the long-term economic and environmental benefits of sustainable forestry practices. It was challenging work, often met with skepticism and resistance. But with each small victory, each mind changed. I felt the echo of Lux's words. "Your understanding of true symbiosis gives you a unique perspective." One evening, as Lily and I sat by a campfire after a long day of fieldwork and advocacy, she turned to me with a soft smile. "You know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "sometimes I think the real magic of the Undercave wasn't what it showed us, but how it changed us." I nodded, watching the flames dance. It gave us a purpose, a mission. It showed us our place in the greater web of life. As we sat there, surrounded by the nighttime sounds of the forest, I felt a deep sense of contentment. Our journey was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But armed with the wisdom of the Undercave and the strength of our partnership, I knew we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but as I looked at Lily, illuminated by the flickering firelight, I felt a surge of hope. Together, we would continue to bridge the gap between the Undercave's profound wisdom and the world that so desperately needed it. In that moment, under the canopy of stars, I realized that the true adventure, the lifelong journey of protecting and nurturing the interconnected web of life, was only just beginning. The years following our Undercave experience flew by in a whirlwind of research, advocacy, and gradual but steady progress. Lily and I had become respected figures in the scientific community, our work on forest ecosystems and interconnectivity gaining traction in academic circles and beyond. One crisp autumn morning, 5 years after our return from the Undercave, we found ourselves back in Whispering Pines. The forest had changed subtly over the years, thanks in part to our conservation efforts. The area once slated for logging was now a thriving nature reserve, teeming with life. As we walked along a familiar trail, Lily suddenly stopped, her eyes widening. "Ben, look!" she exclaimed, pointing to a cluster of mushrooms at the base of an old oak tree. I knelt down to examine them, feeling a jolt of recognition. The mushrooms seemed to pulse with a faint, familiar glow, a reminder of the bioluminescent fungi we'd seen in the undercave. "Do you think?" Lily began, her voice hushed with wonder. I nodded, gently touching one of the caps. "It's like the undercave is reaching out to us again, reminding us of our purpose." As we continued our walk, we discussed the upcoming International Symposium on Forest Ecology, where we were slated to be keynote speakers. Our research had expanded far beyond whispering pines, encompassing forests around the world and drawing connections between diverse ecosystems. "I still can't believe how far we've come," Lily mused as we reached a clearing. "Remember when we used to debate whether mycelial networks could really communicate complex information?" I chuckled, recalling our early discussions. "And now we're presenting evidence of intercontinental fungal information highways. The undercave changed everything for us." Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. A young woman emerged from the trees, her face lighting up with recognition. "Dr. Meadows, Dr. Chen," she called out, hurrying towards us. "I'm so glad I found you. I'm Zoe, one of the new research assistants." We greeted her warmly, and she quickly explained her presence. "There's something you need to see. We've detected unusual seismic activity near the old mining area. It's easier if I show you." Intrigued and slightly concerned, we followed Zoe to a research station set up near the abandoned mines. As we approached, I felt a familiar tingling sensation, the same feeling I'd experienced just before falling into the undercave all those years ago. At the station, Zoe pulled up a series of charts and images on a large screen. "We've been monitoring this area as part of the mine rehabilitation project," she explained. "But look at these readings from the past week." The data showed strange fluctuations in the underground structure, patterns that seemed to pulse and shift in ways that defied conventional geological understanding. Lily leaned in, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This almost looks like the undercave," I finished, our eyes meeting in shared realization. Zoe looked between us, confusion evident on her face. "The undercave? What's that?" For a moment, Lily and I were silent, unsure how to explain. Finally, I took a deep breath. "Zoe, what we're about to tell you might sound impossible, but I promise it's true." Over the next hour, we shared our undercave experience with 2 years had passed since our return from the undercave, and the world around us was changing. Our work had gained significant traction, influencing environmental policies and inspiring a new generation of researchers and activists. But with our growing influence came new challenges and responsibilities. One crisp autumn morning, Lily and I found ourselves in Washington, D.C., preparing to testify before a congressional committee on environmental protection. As we waited in a quiet anteroom, I could feel the tension radiating from Lily. "Ben," she whispered, her fingers nervously smoothing down her blazer. "Are we really ready for this? It's one thing to talk to other scientists, but politicians..." I took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Remember what we learned in the undercave. Everything is connected. These politicians might not see it yet, but that's why we're here." Before Lily could respond, the door opened, and a young aide ushered us into the hearing room. The committee members sat before us, their faces a mix of curiosity and skepticism. As we began our testimony, I felt a familiar sensation, a faint echo of the undercave's energy. It gave me strength as I spoke about the intricate connections between forests, climate, and human well-being. "Honorable members of the committee," I said, my voice steady. "The research Dr. Chen and I have conducted reveals a world far more interconnected than we ever imagined. The health of our forest isn't just an environmental issue. It's an economic one, a public health one, a matter of national security." Lily picked up where I left off, her initial nervousness replaced by passionate conviction. When we protect our forests, we're not just saving trees. We're preserving vital carbon sinks, safeguarding water resources, and maintaining biodiversity that could hold the key to future medical breakthroughs. As we spoke, I noticed a change in the committee members' expressions. The skepticism began to fade, replaced by genuine interest and, in some cases, concern. One senator leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Dr. Meadows, Dr. Chen, your research is compelling, but how do we balance these environmental concerns with economic growth? Many of our constituents rely on industries that, as you've pointed out, can harm these ecosystems." It was a fair question, and one we'd grappled with ourselves. Lily and I exchanged a glance, and I knew we were both thinking of the crucible of choice in the Undercave. "Senator," Lily began, her voice calm but intense, "we understand the concern, but our research shows that this isn't an either-or proposition. By protecting and restoring our forests, we can create new jobs in sustainable industries, boost ecotourism, and ensure the long-term health of the very resources many industries depend on." I nodded, adding, "It's about changing our perspective. Instead of seeing environmental protection as a burden, we need to recognize it as an investment in our future, economically, socially, and ecologically." The hearing continued for hours, with questions ranging from the technical details of our research to the broader implications of our findings. Through it all, I felt the wisdom of the Undercave guiding us, helping us translate complex ecological concepts into terms the politicians could understand and act on. As we left the hearing room, exhausted but hopeful, we were approached by a group of young environmental activists who had been watching the proceedings. "Dr. Meadows, Dr. Chen," one of them, a bright-eyed young woman, called out, "your testimony was incredible. The way you talked about interconnectedness, it's like you've seen it firsthand." Lily and I exchanged a knowing smile. If only they knew. "We're organizing a global youth climate summit," another activist said. "Would you consider being keynote speakers? Your perspective could really inspire the next generation of environmental leaders." The request took us by surprise, but as I looked at Lily, I saw my own excitement mirrored in her eyes. This was another opportunity to spread the wisdom we'd gained, to create more ripples of change. "We'd be honored," I said, feeling a surge of hope for the future. That evening, as Lily and I walked through the National Mall, reflecting on the day's events, we paused by the reflecting pool. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, reminding me of the bioluminescent forests of the Undercave. "You know," Lily said softly, her gaze on the distant horizon, "sometimes I wonder if we're doing enough. The challenges seem so vast." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "I know what you mean, but remember what Lux told us. Every action, no matter how small, can tip the scales. Look at what we've accomplished already." Lily nodded, leaning into me. "You're right. It's just knowing what we know, having seen what we've seen. The responsibility feels enormous sometimes." "It is enormous," I agreed, "but we're not alone in this. Look at those young activists, the politicians who listen today, the researchers building on our work. We're creating a network, just like the mycelial webs we studied." As we stood there watching the fading light reflect off the water, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Our journey from the Undercave had led us here, to this moment, poised to influence global environmental policy and inspire a new generation. The path ahead was still long and challenging, but as I held Lily close, I knew we were ready to face it. The wisdom of the Undercave continued to guide us, reminding us always of the profound interconnectedness of all things. As night fell over the capital, I realized that our greatest adventure, the lifelong mission of protecting and nurturing the web of life, was still unfolding. And with each step, each word, each action, we were creating ripples of change that would echo far beyond our own lives, just as the Undercave had always intended. The Global Youth Climate Summit was in full swing, with thousands of young activists from around the world gathered in a sprawling, eco-friendly convention center. Lily and I had just finished our keynote address, and the energy in the room was electric. As we made our way off the stage, we were immediately surrounded by eager attendees, their eyes shining with inspiration and determination. A young man from Brazil approached us, his voice trembling with emotion. "Dr. Meadows, Dr. Chen, your speech about the interconnectedness of ecosystems, it's exactly what we've been feeling in the Amazon. How can we make others understand?" Before we could answer, a girl from India chimed in. "In my village, we're seeing the effects of climate change firsthand, but it's hard to get people to connect the dots. How do we bridge that gap?" Lily and I exchanged a glance, both of us thinking of our time in the Undercave. How could we translate that profound experience into practical advice? "The key," I began, choosing my words carefully, "is to help people see the connections in their daily lives. Start small, with local ecosystems. Show them how the health of a nearby forest affects water quality, air purity, even the local economy." Lily nodded, adding, "And remember, every ecosystem, no matter how small, is a microcosm of the global environment. By understanding and protecting what's in our own backyards, we lay the groundwork for larger-scale conservation." As we continued to engage with the young activists, I felt a familiar tingling sensation at the back of my neck. I glanced at Lily, seeing the slight widening of her eyes that told me she felt it too. It was the echo of the Undercave, a gentle reminder of our connection to the deeper rhythms of the earth. Later that evening, as Lily and I walked through a nearby nature reserve, discussing the day's events, the feeling intensified. The trees around us seemed to whisper, the ground beneath our feet pulsing with an energy we hadn't felt since our time underground. "Ben," Lily said, her voice hushed with awe, "do you think... could the Undercave be reaching out to us?" Before I could respond, we stumbled upon a small clearing bathed in moonlight. In the center stood an ancient, gnarled oak tree, its branches reaching towards the star-studded sky. As we approached, the air around us shimmered, reminiscent of our first encounter with Lux. Suddenly, a soft, melodious voice filled the clearing. It wasn't Lux, but something older, more primal. "Children of the Undercave," the voice whispered, seeming to come from the oak tree itself. "You have carried our wisdom well." Lily gripped my hand tightly. What are you?" she asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her initial shock. The air shimmered again, and for a moment, I thought I saw the outline of a woman within the tree's trunk. "I am Gaia," the voice replied, "the spirit of the earth itself. The Undercave is but one of my many chambers, and you have proven yourselves worthy guardians of its knowledge." I found my voice, stepping forward. "Gaia, we've tried to share what we learned, to make a difference. But sometimes it feels like we're fighting an impossible battle." A warm chuckle filled the air. "Ah, but that is the nature of growth, is it not? Remember the forests you've studied. Each tree faces countless challenges, yet the forest endures, adapts, thrives." Lily nodded, understanding dawning on her face. "The youth at the summit, they're like seedlings, aren't they? Our role is to nourish them, to help them grow strong." "Precisely," Gaia's voice agreed. "You are not alone in this fight. Every person you inspire, every mind you open to the truth of interconnectedness, becomes a new root in the vast network of change." As we stood there, absorbing Gaia's words, the clearing began to transform. The moonlight intensified, and we found ourselves surrounded by shimmering images of forests, oceans, and mountains from around the world. In each scene, we saw people working to protect and restore the environment. "Behold," Gaia said, her voice fill. 5 years had passed since our life-changing journey to the Undercave. Lily and I had become prominent figures in the environmental movement, our research and advocacy work influencing policies and inspiring action around the world. But as our influence grew, so did the challenges we faced. One stormy evening, we found ourselves back in Whispering Pines, seeking solace in the forest that had started it all. As we hiked through the rain-soaked trails, a sense of unease settled over us. "Ben," Lily said, her voice barely audible over the pattering rain. "Do you ever feel like we're losing touch with what we learned in the Undercave? Like the more we try to change the world, the further we get from that profound connection we felt?" I paused, considering her words. "I know what you mean. Sometimes it feels like we're just shouting into the void, doesn't it?" Before Lily could respond, a flash of lightning illuminated the forest, followed by a deafening crack of thunder. In that brief moment of illumination, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. A familiar shimmer in the air, reminiscent of the mist that had first drawn us into the Undercave. "Lily," I whispered, grabbing her arm. "Did you see that?" She nodded, her eyes wide. "It can't be. Can it?" As if in answer, the mist began to thicken around us. The sounds of the storm faded away, replaced by an ethereal melody we hadn't heard in years. We found ourselves enveloped in the mist, the forest dissolving around us. When the mist cleared, we were standing in the crystalline chamber where our journey had begun all those years ago. Lux materialized before us, its glow somehow both welcoming and somber. "Welcome back, Ben and Lily," Lux's voice echoed through the chamber. "The Undercave has been watching your journey with great interest." "Lux," I said, a mix of emotions swirling within me. "Why have you brought us back?" The being's light pulsed gently. "You have done much good in the world above, but you have also strayed from the path of true understanding. The Undercave calls you back to remind you of what you have forgotten." Lily stepped forward, her brow furrowed. "Forgotten? But we've dedicated our lives to spreading the wisdom we gained here. We've influenced policies, inspired others." "Yes," Lux interrupted, its tone gentle but firm. "You have created change in the world above. But in doing so, you have become entangled in the very systems you sought to change. You speak of interconnectedness, but do you still feel it in your hearts?" The words hit us like a physical blow. We'd been so focused on our mission, on creating tangible change, that we'd lost sight of the profound truth we'd experienced in the Undercave. "What can we do?" I asked, feeling a mixture of shame and determination. "How do we reconnect?" Lux's form expanded, filling the chamber with a soft, pulsing light. "You must undergo the renewal. It will remind you of the truth you once knew, and show you the path forward." Before we could ask what the renewal entailed, the chamber began to shift. The crystalline walls became transparent, revealing a vast, shimmering landscape unlike anything we'd seen before. It was as if we were seeing the entire world at once. Every ecosystem, every living being, connected by threads of light. "Step into the renewal," Lux instructed. "Let it wash away the accumulated distractions of the surface world and reawaken your true understanding." Lily and I exchanged a glance, silently communicating our readiness. Hand in hand, we stepped forward into the shimmering landscape. The sensation was overwhelming. We felt every connection, every relationship in the global ecosystem. We experienced the joy of new growth and the pain of destruction. We felt the struggle of species on the brink of extinction and the resilience of life adapting to change. As the renewal washed over us, I realized how far we'd strayed from our original purpose. We'd become so focused on fighting against environmental destruction that we'd lost sight of what we were fighting for, the beautiful, intricate web of life that connected all things. When the experience finally ended, we found ourselves back in the crystalline chamber, breathless and profoundly moved. "Now you remember," Lux said, its light gentle and comforting. "The world above needs your voice, but it needs your understanding even more. You must find a way to bring the experience of interconnectedness to others, not just the intellectual knowledge of it." Lily wiped tears from her eyes, her voice thick with emotion. "But how, Lux? How do we share something so ineffable?" Lux's light pulsed thoughtfully. "That is the challenge you must now face. Find a way to help others experience the truth you know. Only then can real change occur." As the familiar mist began to swirl around us, signaling our impending return to the surface. I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We'd lost our way, but the Undercave had called us back, reminding us of our true mission. "Thank you, Lux," I said, feeling the mist thickening. "We won't forget again." As we transitioned back to the surface world, I knew that our greatest challenge lay ahead. We had to find a way to bring the profound experience of interconnectedness to a world that desperately needed it. It wouldn't be easy, but with the renewed wisdom of the Undercave guiding us, I knew we were ready to try. The storm had passed when we emerged back in Whispering Pines. As we made our way back to our research station, the forest around us seemed more alive than ever. Every leaf and creature a reminder of the intricate web of life we were part of. Our journey with the Undercave wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning anew. But this time, we carried not just knowledge, but a renewed experience of the profound interconnectedness of all things. And with that, we were ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. The old grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight as Eliza Blackwood sat hunched over her desk, surrounded by stacks of yellowed papers and dusty tomes. The dim light of her desk lamp cast long shadows across the study, giving the room an eerie, almost otherworldly atmosphere. Eliza rubbed her tired eyes, pushing a strand of graying hair behind her ear. "It has to be here somewhere," she muttered, rifling through another pile of documents. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Come in," she called, her voice hoarse from hours of disuse. The door creaked open, revealing her grandson, Thomas. His young face was etched with concern. "Grandma, it's late. You should get some rest." Eliza managed a weak smile. "Just a little longer, dear. I'm close to finding something. I can feel it." Thomas stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the chaos of papers and books. "What exactly are you looking for?" Eliza hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She had always kept her family at arm's length from her research, fearing the dangers it might bring. But Thomas was different. At 17, he possessed a keen mind and an uncanny intuition that reminded her of herself at his age. "Sit down, Thomas," she said, gesturing to a nearby chair. "It's time I told you the truth about our family's history." As Thomas settled into the chair, Eliza took a deep breath. "What I'm about to tell you might sound fantastic, even impossible. But I assure you it's all true." She reached for an old leather-bound journal on her desk. "This belonged to your great-great-grandfather Edmund Blackwood. In it, he describes a series of events that occurred in 1876, events that have shaped our family's destiny ever since." Thomas leaned forward, intrigued. "What kind of events?" Eliza's eyes gleamed with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Edmund was an explorer and an amateur archaeologist. During an expedition in Egypt, he discovered something extraordinary, an ancient artifact of immense power. "What did it do?" Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "According to Edmund's journal, it allowed him to see glimpses of the future," Eliza replied. "But it came at a terrible cost. Each vision drained his life force, aging him prematurely." Thomas's brow furrowed. "But that's impossible." Eliza shook her head. "I thought so too, until I started experiencing the visions myself." The room fell silent as Thomas processed this information. "Is that why you've been researching so intensely? To understand these visions?" "Partly," Eliza nodded. "But more importantly, I'm trying to find a way to control them. The visions are getting stronger, Thomas. And they're showing me something catastrophic." She stood up and began pacing the room. "I've seen cities in ruins, oceans rising to swallow entire coastlines, and a darkness spreading across the world. Something is coming, Thomas. Something that threatens not just our family, but all of humanity." Thomas's face had gone pale. "What can we do?" Eliza stopped pacing and turned to face her grandson. "That's what I've been trying to figure out. Edmund's journal mentions a companion piece to the artifact he found, something that could potentially neutralize its power or even reverse its effects. She gestured to the piles of research around them. I've been searching for any clue about its whereabouts, but so far I've come up empty. Thomas stood up, a determined look in his eyes. Let me help you, Grandma. 2 pairs of eyes are better than 1, right? Eliza felt a surge of pride and affection for her grandson. It's dangerous, Thomas. Once you're involved, there's no going back. I don't care, Thomas said firmly. This is our family's legacy. I want to be part of it. Eliza studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, we'll start fresh in the morning. For now, let's both get some rest. As they tidied up the study, Thomas paused, a thought occurring to him. Grandma, you said the visions show glimpses of the future. Have you seen anything good? Eliza's expression softened. Yes, dear. I've seen moments of great joy and triumph too. The future isn't set in stone. That's why our work is so important. We have the power to shape it. They shared a meaningful look before Thomas bid her good night and left the study. Eliza turned off the desk lamp, plunging the room into darkness save for the moonlight streaming through the window. As she prepared for bed, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that involving Thomas had set something significant in motion. Whether it would lead to their salvation or their downfall remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. Tomorrow, she whispered to herself as she drifted off to sleep, we begin a new chapter. The old lighthouse stood sentinel on the rocky shoreline, its weathered exterior a testament to decades of enduring fierce storms and salty winds. Mara approached it slowly, her boots crunching on the gravel path. She'd avoided this place for years, but now found herself drawn back by an inexplicable pull. As she neared the base of the tower, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was James, the lighthouse keeper's son and her childhood friend. His face, once boyishly handsome, now bore the lines of a man who'd seen his share of hardship. Mara, he called out, squinting against the setting sun. Is that really you? She nodded, suddenly at a loss for words. How does one greet a ghost from the past? James closed the distance between them, his eyes searching her face. It's been, 15 years? 17, Mara corrected softly. Not that I've been counting. A wry smile tugged at James's lips. Of course not. He gestured towards the lighthouse. Want to come inside? Dad's gone into town for supplies. We can catch up. Mara hesitated, memories flooding back of summer days spent exploring the tower, of whispered secrets and shared dreams. I'm not sure that's a good idea, James. His expression fell slightly, but he nodded in understanding. Fair enough. We can talk out here if you prefer. He moved to a nearby bench, brushing off a layer of sand before sitting down. Mara joined him, leaving a careful space between them. For a moment, only the crash of waves and cry of seagulls broke the silence. So, James began, what brings you back to Seaview Cove? Last I heard, you were making waves in the big city. Mara's fingers absently traced the rough wood of the bench. I was, but things change. My mother, she's not well. I've come home to help care for her. James's face softened with sympathy. I'm sorry to hear that. Mrs. Callahan was always kind to me. If there's anything I can do. Thank you, Mara said, managing a small smile. How about you? Still keeping the light burning bright? James chuckled, but there was a hint of something darker beneath the sound. Someone has to. Dad's eyesight isn't what it used to be, and, well, let's just say I never quite managed to spread my wings the way you did. The words stung more than Mara expected. James, He held up a hand, cutting her off. No, I didn't mean it like that. I'm glad you got out, saw the world. One of us had to. A gust of wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of brine and memories. Mara hugged herself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. Do you ever think about that summer? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before everything fell apart? James was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Only every day, he finally replied. Mara's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected such raw honesty. I'm sorry I left the way I did, without saying goodbye. You were scared, James said, turning to face her. We both were. Finding that body on the beach, it changed everything. Mara nodded, the images still vivid in her mind. The pale, bloated form washed up on the shore. The terror in James's eyes as they realized what they'd stumbled upon. The suffocating weight of a secret too big for two teenagers to bear. Have you ever told anyone? She asked. James shook his head. No. Have you? Never, Mara whispered. A seagull landed nearby, eyeing them curiously before taking flight again. James watched it go, a wistful expression on his face. Detective Sarah Reeves stood at the edge of the pier, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. The salty breeze tousled her hair as she contemplated the events of the past few days. Behind her, the bustling sounds of the harbor slowly died down as workers finished their shifts and headed home. I thought I might find you here, a familiar voice called out. Sarah turned to see her partner, Detective Mark Thompson, approaching. His typically neat appearance was disheveled, tie loosened and jacket slung over his shoulder. Mark, she acknowledged with a nod. Any news? He shook his head, coming to stand beside her. Nothing concrete, but there's talk down at the precinct, rumors flying everywhere. Sarah's jaw clenched. About the commissioner? Yeah, Mark sighed. Some say he's in on it. Others think he's being set up. Either way, it's not looking good. The two detectives stood in silence for a moment, watching as the sky transformed into a canvas of oranges and pinks. The case they'd been working on for months had suddenly exploded into something much bigger than either of them had anticipated. We need to move fast, Sarah said, breaking the silence. If the commissioner really is involved in this trafficking ring, we can't trust anyone at the department. Mark ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his voice. I know, but what can we do? We're just two detectives against what could be an entire network of corrupt officials. Sarah turned to face her partner, determination blazing in her eyes. We do what we've always done, Mark. We follow the evidence no matter where it leads us. Even if it leads us straight to the top? Mark asked, his voice low. Especially then, Sarah replied firmly. As they spoke, a figure emerged from the shadows of a nearby warehouse. Both detectives instinctively reached for their weapons, but relaxed slightly when they recognized the newcomer. Easy there, said Officer Jenny Chen, holding up her hands. I come in peace. Jenny? Sarah frowned. What are you doing here? The young officer glanced around nervously before approaching. I overheard you two talking earlier at the station. About the case, the commissioner, all of it. Mark tensed. And? Jenny took a deep breath. I want to help. I've seen things that didn't sit right with me, but I was too scared to speak up. Sarah and Mark exchanged a look. This could be the break they needed, or it could be an elaborate trap. What kind of things? Sarah asked cautiously. Jenny lowered her voice. Late-night meetings in the commissioner's office, unmarked envelopes changing hands. And last week, I saw him with a man I recognized from the surveillance photos of the docks, the ones you two have been investigating. Mark's eyes widened. You're sure about this? Jenny nodded solemnly. I'm risking everything by telling you this, but I became a cop to protect people, not to turn a blind eye to corruption. Sarah placed a reassuring hand on Jenny's shoulder. You're doing the right thing. But you need to understand how dangerous this is. If what you're saying is true, we're up against some very powerful people. I know, Jenny replied, her voice steadier now. But I can't stay silent anymore. What do you need me to do? The three of them huddled closer, their voices barely above a whisper as they began to formulate a plan. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared below the horizon, a new sense of purpose filled the air. "All right," Sarah said finally. "We start tomorrow. Jenny, you'll be our eyes and ears inside the precinct. Mark and I will follow up on some leads outside official channels. We meet back here in 48 hours, same time." As they prepared to part ways, Mark grabbed Sarah's arm. "Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back." Sarah looked at her partner, then at Jenny, seeing the same mix of fear and determination in their eyes that she felt in her own heart. "We swore an oath to serve and protect," she said firmly. "It's time we lived up to it, no matter the cost." With final nods of agreement, the three split up, each heading in a different direction. As Sarah walked back to her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had set something momentous in motion. Whatever came next, she knew that the next 48 hours would change everything. The gentle lapping of waves against the pier faded behind her, replaced by the sounds of the city coming alive for the night. In the distance, sirens wailed, a reminder of the never-ending battle between good and evil, justice and corruption. And tonight, in this city, the lines between those forces were about to be redrawn.